What does it feel like when your franchise's brightest star starts looking toward the exit, and every expert in hockey is quietly whispering that he's already gone? Vancouver Canucks fans are about to find out, as NHL insider James Mirtle just delivered the most devastating assessment yet about Quinn Hughes' future. And it's the kind of brutal honesty that no fanbase wants to hear about their captain and cornerstone player. This isn't just another trade rumor or off-season speculation. This is a respected hockey analyst essentially writing the obituary for one of the most important relationships in Canucks history, suggesting that Hughes' departure from Vancouver isn't a question of if, but rather when and where. The implications are staggering, the timeline is accelerating, and the emotional impact on a fan base that has endured decades of disappointment could be absolutely devastating. Mirtle's assessment cuts straight to the heart of every Canucks supporter's deepest fear, that their team's inability to build a legitimate contender will cost them the most talented defenseman they've developed in decades. When insiders start using phrases like "seems unlikely to me" about a franchise player staying put, it's time to face some uncomfortable truths about organizational direction and championship competitiveness. Quinn Hughes represents everything Vancouver has dreamed of developing, a homegrown superstar who embodies skill, leadership, and championship-caliber talent. As an annual Norris Trophy candidate and arguably one of the elite defensemen in the entire NHL, Hughes has given Canucks fans legitimate reasons for optimism about their franchise's future. However, individual excellence can only mask organizational shortcomings for so long. Despite Hughes' spectacular performances, the Canucks finished 18th overall last season with 90 points, a record that screams mediocrity rather than contender. For a player of Hughes' caliber, being trapped in hockey's middle class represents a waste of prime years that may be difficult to accept indefinitely. The situation becomes even more complicated when considering Hughes' competitive timeline. At his current age and development trajectory, he's entering what should be the most productive years of his career. These are the seasons when elite players expect to compete for Stanley Cups, not fight for playoff positioning against teams with superior organizational depth and direction. Hughes has experienced glimpses of what playoff hockey feels like, but he's never been part of a legitimate championship contender. For a player who consistently performs at an elite level, the desire to test himself against the absolute best competition in meaningful games becomes increasingly irresistible as years pass without organizational progress. The captain's role adds another layer of complexity to his situation. Hughes isn't just watching from the sidelines as his team struggles. He's directly responsible for providing leadership and optimism to teammates who may be equally frustrated with the franchise's trajectory. That burden becomes heavier when the gap between personal excellence and team success continues widening. The Canucks' current roster construction presents fascinating contradictions that explain why experts like Mirtle remain skeptical about their championship prospects. On paper, they possess legitimate talent in Hughes, Elias Pettersson, and other key contributors. In reality, their supporting cast and organizational depth remain questionable at best. The uncertainty surrounding Pettersson and Thatcher Demko creates additional volatility that prevents outside observers from viewing Vancouver as a serious Western Conference threat. When two of your most important players carry question marks about their health, performance, or future commitment, it becomes impossible to project sustained success. Demko's injury history and inconsistent availability have created goaltending uncertainty that championship contenders simply cannot afford. Elite defensemen like Hughes need reliable goaltending to maximize their impact, and persistent questions about the position create systemic problems that extend far beyond individual games. Pettersson's situation adds another layer of concern, as his performance fluctuations and contract status create uncertainty about Vancouver's offensive foundation. Hughes needs elite offensive support to elevate his own game, and questions about Pettersson's consistency or long-term commitment could influence Hughes' own evaluation of the franchise's direction. The Western Conference's competitive landscape makes Vancouver's challenges even more daunting. Teams like Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton, and others have demonstrated the kind of depth and organizational commitment required for sustained success. The Canucks appear to be playing catch-up in a race where standing still means falling further behind. Mirtle's identification of the New Jersey Devils as Hughes' likely destination isn't random speculation. It represents a convergence of factors that make this potential partnership almost inevitable if Hughes decides to leave Vancouver. The timing, salary cap situation, and family connections create a perfect storm of circumstances that favor this exact scenario. The Hughes family connection cannot be understated in its importance to this potential move. Quinn's brothers Jack and Luke are already established stars in New Jersey, creating a family reunion opportunity that adds emotional appeal to what would already be an attractive hockey situation. The chance to play alongside his siblings in their prime years represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. New Jersey's salary cap situation heading into the 2027-28 season is absolutely pristine for accommodating a superstar addition. With over $60 million in projected cap space before considering contract extensions, the Devils could easily absorb Hughes' next contract regardless of its size or term. This financial flexibility gives them negotiating advantages that most other teams simply cannot match. The Devils' young core provides exactly the kind of championship foundation that Hughes has been seeking throughout his career. Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, and other key contributors represent a group entering their prime years with legitimate championship aspirations and the organizational support to achieve those goals. From a hockey perspective, Quinn Hughes would transform New Jersey's defensive capabilities while providing the kind of two-way excellence that championship teams require. His ability to quarterback power plays, transition the puck efficiently, and provide offensive creation from the blue line would complement the Devils' existing strengths perfectly. The organizational culture in New Jersey has shifted dramatically in recent years, with management demonstrating the kind of aggressive win-now mentality that appeals to elite players seeking championship opportunities. Their willingness to make bold moves and invest in talent creates an environment where Hughes could maximize both his individual success and team accomplishments. The most heartbreaking aspect of this situation for Canucks fans is how the timeline creates increasing pressure with each passing season. Hughes has 2 years remaining on his current contract, meaning Vancouver has a finite window to prove they can build a legitimate contender around their franchise cornerstone. If the Canucks experience another disappointing season that reinforces doubts about their championship trajectory, Hughes' trade value will paradoxically increase while the likelihood of retaining him decreases. Teams will recognize they're acquiring not just an elite player, but one who may be eager to escape an underperforming situation. The 2025-26 season becomes absolutely critical for Vancouver's long-term future. They need to demonstrate tangible progress toward championship contention, not just marginal improvement that maintains their middle-class status. Hughes will be evaluating every organizational decision through the lens of championship competitiveness. Vancouver's front office understands the stakes involved, but understanding and executing are entirely different challenges. They need to make moves that convince Hughes the franchise is committed to winning at the highest level, not just remaining competitive enough to sell tickets and maintain fan interest. The pressure extends beyond just Hughes' individual situation. If Vancouver loses their captain and best player, it sends a devastating message about the franchise's ability to retain elite talent and compete with organizations that prioritize championship success over financial considerations. For Canucks fans who have endured decades of disappointment, heartbreak, and near misses, losing Quinn Hughes would represent another crushing blow to their championship hopes and organizational credibility. Hughes embodies everything they've wanted from a franchise player: skill, leadership, loyalty, and genuine connection to the community. The potential departure would also validate every criticism about Vancouver's organizational competence and championship commitment. When your homegrown superstar chooses to leave for better opportunities elsewhere, it exposes uncomfortable truths about franchise priorities and management effectiveness. Hughes' trade would inevitably trigger a rebuilding phase that could set the franchise back several years. The return package, regardless of its quality, would likely focus on future assets rather than immediate contributors, essentially admitting that competitive contention isn't realistic in the near term. The psychological impact on remaining players could be equally devastating. When your captain and best player decides the situation is hopeless enough to request a trade, it sends shockwaves through the locker room that are difficult to overcome with motivational speeches or roster additions. Vancouver's front office faces a make-or-break moment that will define the franchise's trajectory for the next decade. They need to demonstrate immediate and substantial progress toward championship contention, not just promise future improvements that may never materialize. The solution requires more than incremental roster improvements or coaching changes. Vancouver needs transformative moves that convince Hughes and other key players that the organization is genuinely committed to competing at the highest level rather than maintaining comfortable mediocrity. Time is running out for the Canucks to salvage this relationship and prevent what would be one of the most devastating losses in franchise history. The clock is ticking, the pressure is mounting, and the consequences of failure extend far beyond losing one player. Hughes' potential departure represents more than a roster move. It's a referendum on Vancouver's organizational competence and championship ambition. The next 18 months will determine whether the Canucks can convince their captain to believe in their vision, or whether they'll be forced to watch him flourish elsewhere while they rebuild from the ashes of another missed opportunity. The writing may already be on the wall, but Vancouver still has time to change the narrative. Whether they possess the courage and competence to make the necessary moves remains the most important question facing the franchise. What do you think Vancouver needs to do to keep Hughes? Or is this situation already beyond saving? Should Canucks fans be preparing for the inevitable heartbreak? Or is there still hope for a miraculous turnaround? Share your thoughts on what could be one of the most consequential decisions in franchise history.